Welcome back to Real Takes, where we are all movie love all the time. I want to start the show, as I have the last few weeks, saying that I continue to stand with the people of Ukraine, and I also stand with all the people who are being affected by the massive international food crisis that this senseless, inhumane war is causing. And please let me know in the comments your preferred food relief organization. I'm not as up on my world food relief organizations as I would like. So I'm thinking about people who don't have enough food tonight because of Russia's aggression, and hope that we can all be sending whatever help we can send to them as well. So tonight we're back at the desk because the couch wasn't available. You know, sometimes you got to be flexible. But we are still in Aries season, and we are celebrating the divine, the wonderful, the fantastic Emma Thompson, who is an actor and a writer and an Aries and full of fire and passion, like fire signs are, and a huge, huge favorite of mine. I love watching her work. I love who she is in the world, and how smart and funny and righteous she is. So we are celebrating Emma Thompson tonight. We're on a little roll of celebrating actresses, which isn't usually the focus here. Usually it's directors and films, but you got to do what you got to do. So Emma Thompson's parents are both actors, and when she was at Cambridge, she was in the famous Cambridge Footlights group, which was a comedy group with, at the time, Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie. And in the 80s, she was working in television in England and doing comedy. And in the late 80s, she met and married Kenneth Branagh, and they would do several film versions of Shakespeare plays together. But first, they made a thriller romance called Dead Again, which involves past lives and scissors. I'm not kidding. Check it out. It's a good thriller romance watch. And on that film set, she met producer Lindsay Doran. And Lindsay Doran had been working for Sidney Pollack's production company for a bunch of years, and was starting to put together her own projects. And Lindsay Doran and Emma Thompson realized that they were both huge Jane Austen fans. Now, I am a huge Jane Austen fan. I've read all 6 of her novels, some of them multiple times. I'm a big fan. So Lindsay Doran had the idea of making Sense and Sensibility into a movie, and she asked Emma Thompson to write the script. And at first, Emma Thompson was sort of wary because, well, first of all Jane Austen novels are in some ways hard to adapt, because even though they're smart and deep and, still speak to human nature on so many levels, they're about women who have to do a lot of waiting. They have to wait. The women don't get to take action very often, which is why Lizzie from Pride and Prejudice is so unusual, because she takes a lot of action. But Lindsay Doran convinced her, and Emma Thompson started working on this script. And when they first started working on it, there was no intention of Emma Thompson being in the film. First of all, she was in her, I guess when she started, she was in her early mid-20s, but she's a little old to play Eleanor, who she ultimately played, who's supposed to be sort of 19 or 20. But this crazy thing happened while she was working on the script for Sense and Sensibility, which is she became a huge movie star. She won an Oscar for her performance in Howard's End. She was nominated for her performances in Remains of the Day and In the Name of the Father. So when it came time to actually shoot the film, she was cast as Eleanor. And if you, well, first of all, just as an aside, there are far worse ways to spend an evening than to watch Emma Thompson interviews on YouTube, because she's so funny. And if you are into movies, or if you like Sense and Sensibility, get your hands on a DVD copy of Sense and Sensibility and listen to her audio commentary with Lindsay Doran. It's so insightful and really funny from start to finish, and just so much information about what goes into filmmaking and what hard work it is, and tons of entertaining backstory. But they shot Sense and Sensibility in 94, 95 in England, and Ang Lee was the director. And Ang Lee he'd only made 2 movies, I think, when he did Sense and Sensibility, and he's Taiwanese. And so it was a big deal to hire him to make a British film. And he said, okay, jumping in to clarify. So obviously people of all cultures can make films about other cultures. It's part of what we do in art. And obviously American and British filmmakers have been supposedly making films about places all over the world for decades. I would argue largely unsuccessfully, because they do it through a limited lens. But Ang Lee has spoken in particular about being nervous about making a British period piece when he had never spent any time in England at all. And so he went to England 6 months before shooting began, just to kind of immerse himself in the culture and kind of feel his way around a little bit before shooting began. And Emma Thompson has said that there were some interesting culture clashes on set, because apparently in the Taiwanese filmmaking community, actors never question the director. Like, you just do what the director says. And in the British theater and filmmaking worlds, actors are constantly questioning directors and challenging and have their own ideas about the material. And apparently Ang Lee was pretty shocked when they started shooting, and, you know, he'd have a direction and there'd then be, you know, discussion about the direction. She also said that he had such a strong vision that he didn't always do as many takes as some directors do. I mean, there's a kind of, for a lot of movies, you do a wide shot and then you do a medium shot and then you do one point of view and another point of view. If it's 2 people in a scene, if it's a group scene, you do more. And he often wouldn't do all those shots because he had such a clear idea of what he wanted. And at first, that made the producers and Emma Thompson, who was the writer, very nervous. But as the dailies came in and the shots were so beautiful, that they learned to just completely trust him because his vision was so strong. So they made Sense and Sensibility. Kate Winslet played Marian, Emma Thompson's younger sister, and there's a great story there. So Kate Winslet had only done one movie, Heavenly Creatures, and she was called to read for a much smaller role, the role of Lucy Steele, but she really wanted Marianne, and she knew she could do it. And so she went to the audition and pretended there'd been a mistake, and that thought she was supposed to read for Marianne, which was totally not true. She knew she was supposed to read for Lucy Steele, but she prepared for Marianne. She walked in as if she was supposed to read for Marianne and ended up getting the role of Marianne. And, you know, we're on this actress streak. We just talked about Bette Davis last week, who, you know, took on the head of Warner Brothers Films to get the kind of roles she wanted. Here's Kate Winslet, you know, bluffing her way through this audition moment. And, you know, the role of Marianne was her first Oscar nomination, and Heavenly Creatures had already gotten her a lot of attention as an actor with huge talent, who I also love. But Sense and Sensibility was a really different part and kind of solidified her as, you know, as an up-and-coming movie star. and Hugh Grant is in the film, and the late, lovely, wonderful Alan Rickman is in the film, and a whole cast of British theater actors. And they had a long rehearsal process for, I mean, certainly by today's standards, I think they had a 6-week rehearsal process. I might be making that up. I'll try to confirm that. And they did all kinds of exercises because Ang Lee said he knew that, everyone involved was a really good actor, but he wanted to make sure they were all in the same movie. And so one of the things he had them do was write letters to each other in character as if it were 5 years after the story is over. So they did that kind of thing to kind of dig into their roles. And I love this movie. I remember seeing this movie in the theater in 1996 and with my friend Alexis, and the theater was packed because in 1996 movies about, British period piece movies played in theaters for months at a time sometimes, and they were packed. People went to see them in theaters. And everything just comes together in this movie so well. And I have to say that even though I'm a huge Jane Austen fan, I think Emma Thompson wrote a better end to Sense and Sensibility than Jane Austen wrote. It's not that the actual plot points are different. It's how the characters just at the very end get there emotionally. And I think it's a stronger end than what Jane Austen did. So all props to Emma Thompson. She said it was very hard to write, and to be on set as the writer and also acting was very challenging. They had to, there's very little dialogue in Sense and Sensibility, and sometimes they needed off-the-cuff expositional lines, and they didn't really want to trust the actors to make it up because they hadn't immersed themselves in Jane Austen's language the way Emma Thompson had. So people were constantly knocking on her trailer door saying, they need a line for this moment. Can we have a line? And she'd make up a line and they'd go off and take it. So huge work on her part to make this movie happen. And she is, to this day, the first and only actor who has won both an acting and a writing Oscar. So there are many actors who've been nominated for writing Oscars but have only won acting Oscars. There are actors who've won writing Oscars but not acting Oscars. But she is the only one to have won an acting Oscar for Howard's End and a writing Oscar for Sense and Sensibility. So Sense and Sensibility is just a delightful film with excellent acting, beautiful direction by Ang Lee. And I'll just say I had the privilege of seeing an interview with Ang Lee live here in Provincetown when he was honored by the Provincetown Film Festival. And when he was interviewed by John Waters, he said two things. John Waters really pressed him on, who influenced him. And he said, if he had to pick one director, he really wants to make movies like Stanley Kubrick, which is a fascinating thing to say when you think about Sense and Sensibility. And then the other thing he said was he just wants to communicate from the center of his heart. So that's Ang Lee. And then the other Emma Thompson movie that I want to talk about, I got a little fuzzy on Emma Thompson's filmography. So she's gone on to have a huge decades-long career in film and continued to not only act but write. So she's been in big franchise films like the Harry Potter series, the Men in Black series, but then she's also done smaller independent films. Most recently, she was in The Children Act. Well, not most recently, a few years ago, beautiful movie with Stanley Tucci, stunning acting in that film. She wrote and starred in the Nanny McPhee series, which has been incredibly successful. She continues to do rom-coms and comedies of all sorts, including the Mindy Kaling comedy Late Night, where she plays a late night talk show host who sort of goes through a life crisis. So she just turns up in lots of different places in lots of different kinds of projects. Oh, she was also in Angels in America, the Tony Kushner play that was made into a 6-hour movie by Mike Nichols. So, just lots of interesting, compelling work over the decades from Emma Thompson. But the movie that I want to talk about the other movie that I want to talk about in celebrating Emma Thompson is Stranger Than Fiction, which came out in 2006 and was written by Zach Helm and directed by Mark Forster, who had also directed Monsters Ball and Finding Neverland. And it stars Will Ferrell, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Will Ferrell, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Queen Latifah, who's a little underused, I hate to say, in this movie. If I had one complaint about this movie, it would be that Queen Latifah is a little underused. But we talked about Queen Latifah when we talked about Set It Off in February. And Dustin Hoffman is also in the movie. And in this movie, Will Ferrell plays an IRS auditor who starts hearing a voice and realizes that his life is being narrated by an author, or conversely, it's a movie about an author who realizes that her main character is actually alive. And her novel that she's writing is called Death and Taxes, which stars Will Ferrell's character. Now, I love a great creative process story, and I also love a great, what's the meaning of life, fate versus self-determination, what are the forces controlling us kind of movie. And this is both of those in one, with Emma Thompson, Queen Latifah, and Maggie Gyllenhaal in it. So I'm sort of in bliss when I watch this movie. Interestingly, Lindsay Doran produced this movie as well, and she sent the script to Emma Thompson. And Emma Thompson said that she read one page and called Lindsay Doran and said she'd do it because it was clear it was so original. And then as she continued reading the script, the thing that struck her the most was that she said each character really had their own voice and speaking style. And she said that is so rare in screenplay writing these days. So often scripts are all the voice of the writer. Each character doesn't have enough distinction in their speaking style. And she just loved this script. And also, she's a writer too, right? So she plays a very successful writer who hasn't put out a novel in 10 years and is clinically depressed while trying to write this novel. And Emma Thompson could totally relate. She's not a novelist, and I don't think she considers herself clinically depressed, but, any writer can tell you that the writing process can be hell. And so sort of coming into that space of, feeling tortured by your work and lost in what you're trying to communicate was, I'm sure she worked hard at it, but didn't feel like a huge stretch for Emma Thompson. So she took on doing the movie right away. And wait, I'm looking at my notes. Oh, it's interesting. Lindsay Doran said in an interview, so they had this script and then they needed to find a director, and they talked to 40 different directors. And Lindsay Doran said that when each director sort of pitched them their vision after reading the script, she said it was like 40 different movies. Other than the character names, you wouldn't have known that these directors were talking about the same movie. Like, some only focused on the love story and didn't focus as much on the creativity. Some only focused on the creative process and didn't, focus on the love story at all. So it's really interesting. how many different ways an artist can come at source material. So this movie isn't universally loved. I think, Will Ferrell's known for a certain kind of comedy, and I think his fans were a little disappointed that this was a different kind of movie and a different kind of performance. And then some people talk about it as being sort of predictable. And for me, I don't really care that it's predictable. I care about what the plot is exploring, the issues, the themes, the feeling that the plot is digging into are so meaty and weighty for me that I don't mind. And then Emma Thompson is so fantastic. Like the range of her ability to convey pathos and pain and heartache, I guess, and also be really funny is so impressive. So it's actually one of my sort of go-to, I have a list of fun movies that don't insult my intelligence, and this is on the list. And it's a deeper movie than just a fun movie. It's not a slapstick comedy, but it's a I mean, I guess we would call it a dramedy, but I wouldn't quite use that word about it. But Emma Thompson definitely shines. Everybody's great. It's really fun to see Emma Thompson and Queen Latifah working together, and I just love it. So I love tons of Emma Thompson movies. Tell me what your favorite Emma Thompson movie is in the comments. Let us celebrate her great artistry this week as she celebrates her birthday, and check out these movies or other ones you like with her in them, and I will see you next Wednesday. Thanks for watching Real Takes. Hit the subscribe button below so the algorithms will tell you when new episodes are out. And if you want to support Real Takes, please visit my Patreon page where you can join at any tier from $2 to $100 per thing I make. The $15 tier is specifically about supporting Real Takes, and you'll get behind the scenes information and be thanked in future videos. See you next Wednesday.